30 years ago, the people of Scotland were given a chance to decide their future. But was this one of the most cynical exercises of recent times? This is a tale of government secrecy, intrigue and double-dealing, and of how the political fallout changed the course of history.
Feel when I dance with you, we move like the sea. You're all I want to know. I feel free.
In 1969, Colonel Gaddafi had seized power in Libya in a military coup. He now controlled a substantial part of the world's oil supply. In 1973, the Yom Kippur War between Israel, Egypt and Syria erupted. The Americans supplied the Israelis with arms. OPEC responded by raising the price of oil.
The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, forced up the price of our oil imports. Britain was struggling. The miners were striking. The country was almost bankrupt. Britain was so broke, it had to go to the world's banker, the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, for a loan.
We had some economic problems.
The IMF loan had its price, spending cuts, and the impact of those cuts sent shockwaves through Britain.
By the early 1970s, the opening of a new chapter in Scotland's economic history gave the Scottish nationalists an unexpected boost.
There came a time when natural resources became so precious that men were forced to seek them in alien environments. From all over Earth, men and materials were gathered, machines the like of which had never been seen before. A leap of technology as great as that which placed the first men on the moon.
Even before the first barrel of oil had been produced, it was being seen as a lifeline. The desire to get it flowing wasn't just driven by Scottish pride, but by British survival. Britain's new Secretary of State for Energy welcomed the first North Sea oil ashore. It was a momentous day for the government and for Tony Benn. Black gold that's poured out of the North Sea has pumped billions into the Treasury's coffers. Since 1968, the oil companies have paid more than £230 billion in today's money on the oil they've extracted. That brings in roughly £30 billion a year. For every £1 you spend at the pumps, 65p goes on tax, making you, the British motorist, the most highly taxed in Europe.
That money, you could argue, was used to restructure the British economy, on which we have lived quite well for a number of years now.
Every January, under the 30-year rule, government papers are released to the general public. Most are banal. Some are political dynamite. While working as an economist at the Scottish office, Gavin McCrone submitted a paper on the impact of North Sea oil. Among his conclusions, large revenues and balance of payments gains would indeed accrue to a Scottish government in the event of independence. The country would tend to be in chronic surplus to a quite embarrassing degree, and Scottish banks could expect to find themselves inundated with a speculative inflow of foreign funds.
It is hard to see any conclusion other than to allow Scotland to have that part of the continental shelf which would have been hers if she had been independent all along. North Sea oil could have far-reaching consequences for Scottish membership of the EEC because of the tremendously increased political power it would confer as the major producer of oil in Western Europe. Scotland would be in a key position, and other countries would be extremely foolish if they did not seek to do all they could to accommodate Scottish interests. The Scottish pound would be seen as a good hedge against inflation and devaluation, and its currency would become the hardest in Europe. This paper has shown that the advent of North Sea oil has completely overturned the traditional economic arguments used against Scottish nationalism.
Licensing policy must remain in the hands of central government. We recommend that it would not be consistent with the political and economic unity of the United Kingdom at large to devolve legislative responsibility for oil and gas developments to the regions. The exploration and exploitation of our oil and gas resources need to be considered in the light of our national and international policies.
Cysonnach ei fianish yn och gymigala benywish malach ymysg nynduchenen as biastich sa rynyorbe yanu giava gas lion tasklan fat jeicher ichit blione.
It was not my purpose to try and hide anything. Rather the reverse. I was trying to wake Whitehall and ministers down south up to the seriousness of the situation. The Scottish GDP goes up by about 20% if you put North Sea oil into it.
That's impossible!
Search your feelings, you know it to be true.
The Scottish GDP goes up by about 20% if you put North Sea oil into it.
Oil had the potential to change the course of a country.
Because if the world knew what we knew, the amount of oil that was available, then they would be less likely to try and bully us to make cuts.
Ma féin riolach hessiger as úr leis an nodda. Ach, an nódói cyú fe plannig yma siemblik rialdas mar borin sin fuarachach ríist. Chaníisiget de veintje na halabe, de gírach a vaun de rolle.
The poor hard done by English taxpayer has really had enough of this subsidy to Scotland and wants a little bit of money to creep back south of the border from time to time.
In 2010, 3 times the amount was spent on welfare in Scotland than was raised by oil and gas.
Oil brings in roughly £30 billion a year.
Even though the oil is declining, the oil production is declining, your advice would be better late than never, do it now.
Exactly. In fact, all the more imperative that you do it now, because you should now realize the mistake of the past, and you have to make up for lost time.
North Sea oil runs out very slowly, whereas the flow of cash from the city can run out just like that.
We have a deficit higher than Portugal, and they've had to go cap in hand to the EU for a bailout.
Worried about deficits, worried about cuts.
I think it's hilarious that Scotland thinks it can go independent, and if you really think you can survive on your own, you know, jettison yourself off to be an economic power the size of Iceland, then good luck to you.
Well, I guess they were right? Iceland's economy goes down in 2009, down 6.7%, so they were right. Wait. Wait, I'm getting further numbers here. What am I hearing? Oh, it turns out it is now doing much better than the European Union, and it's even doing better than the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Those are all the developed countries. So they're beating the rest of the world.
This idea that, you're not worth anything, you can't survive on your own, but we really, really want to keep a hold of you, you know? I mean, it's just, doesn't seem to...
I'm not saying that Scotland couldn't make it on her own. Of course, Scotland could, just as England could.
So why would England be worse off?
Because we'd be worse off economically, I think.
If Scotland wants to be independent, OK, be my guest, go ahead. Because actually we're all subsidising them, I think, by way of benefits and all sorts of reasons. And if they want to show how independent they are, OK, thank you and goodbye.